And let's continue with the fifth chapter of Greenwitch by Susan Cooper. Simon and Barney ended up following Rufus the dog back to the caravan of the painter who originally took him, and even though they tried to hide from him, they were kind of immediately under his thrall, and now they are inside his caravan to get Barney's painting back. I was confused, the two brothers. So this agent of the dark is describing the caravan, and Simon asks if he is a gypsy, and the man continues to answer where I cut off before. Half Ramnichow, the man said, and half Gorgio. He turned and stood with arms folded, surveying them. I'm part gypsy, yes. That's the best you'll find these days, on the road at any rate. Even the Vardo is only part gypsy. He nodded at the roof of the caravan, and they saw, looking up, that it was edged all about with the same brightly painted scrollwork that decorated the outside, and that tools of some small kind hung all over one wall, with an old fiddle and an oddly stripped woolen rug. But the furniture was shiny, cheap, and modern, and the chimney was not a real chimney, but only a vent for carrying away hot air from above the neat electric stove. Then they saw suddenly that the ceiling was painted, from end to end, above the bright, conventional curlicues of the scrollwork. A huge, churning, abstract painting was spread above their heads. There was no recognizable form to its shapes and colors, yet it was a disturbing, alarming sight, full of strange whirls and shadows, and shot through with lurid colors that jarred on the senses. Barney felt again the power and the nastiness that had leapt at him from the caravan he had seen the man's painting in. Barney felt again the power and the nastiness that had leapt at him from the canvas he had seen the man painting in the harbor. Up on the ceiling, too, he saw the particularly unnerving shade of green he had found so unpleasant out there. He said suddenly to Simon, "Let's go home." "Not yet," said the dark man. He spoke softly without moving, and Barney felt the chill awareness of the dark reaching out to control him, until, without warning, a faint hissing sound that had been vaguely puzzling him erupted into the boiling of a kettle, and a shrill whistle filled the room and made a sense of evil suddenly ridiculous. But Simon had felt it too. He looked at the dark man and thought, "You keep steering us away from being frightened, delaying it. Why do you want us to stay?" The dark-haired man busied himself with the prosaic matter of spooning instant coffee into a mug and pouring on water from the kettle. "Either of you drink coffee?" he said over his shoulder. Simon said quickly, "No, thank you." Barney said, "I wouldn't mind a drink of water." Seeing Simon scowl, he added plaintively, "Well, I did get awfully thirsty walking, not just a drink of water from the tap." "In the cupboard by your right foot," the painter said. "You will find some cans of orange soda." He moved to the small table at the end of the canvas, stirring his coffee. "Sealed," he added, with a deliberate, ironic stare at Simon. "Fizzy, harmless, straight from the factory." "Thanks," Barney said promptly, bending to the cupboard door. The man said, "You might bring out a cardboard box. You'll find in there, too." "All right." After some bumping and rattling, Barney came up with an unremarkable brown box, set it on the table, and produced 2 drinks from the crook of his elbow. Without comment, Simon took one and popped open the top, to a reassuring hiss, but a stubborn caution still made him reluctant to drink, and he made only a pretense of swigging at the can. Barney drank thirstily, with appreciative gurgling noises. "That's better. Thanks. Now may I have my picture back?" "Open the box," the man said, the long hair falling about his face as he drank from his mug. "Is it in there?" "Open the box," the man said again, with a faint edge of strain in his voice. Simon thought, "He's as tense as a strung wire. Why?" Setting down his drink on the table, Barney opened the top of the brown cardboard box. He took out a sheet of paper and held it up critically. "Yes, that's my drawing." He glanced back into the box, and all at once a brightness was in his eyes, a fierce brilliance flashing into his brain, and he was staring in disbelief, crying out in a voice that broke into huskiness, "Simon, it's the Grail!" The same instant, the world about them changed. With a crash, the doors of the little caravan swung shut. The blinds fell over the windows, cutting out all light of day. There was an instant of black darkness, but almost at once Barney found himself blinking in the dim light. Wildly he looked round for its source, and then he realized, with a sick shock, that the glow, still dim, disturbing, came not from any lamp, but from the painted ceiling. Up on the roof, the eerie green whorls that had so troubled him were shining with a cold, bleak light. They had shapes, he saw now, angular shapes arranged in groups, like a kind of unknown writing. In the cold green light he looked down, fearful, disbelieving, and saw the same wonderful, familiar object that he had seen before gleaming inside the cardboard box. Gently he lifted it out, forgetting everything around him, and set it on the table. Simon breathed beside him. "It is!" Before them on the table the Cornish Grail glowed, the little golden goblet that they had first seen, after so hard a search, deep in a cave beneath the cliffs of Kamar Head, and that they had saved from the people and the power of the dark for a while. They did not understand what it was, or what it could do. They only knew that to Merriman and the light it was one of the great things of power, something of infinite value, and that one day it would come into its own, when the strange runic signs and words engraved over the sides could be understood. Barney gazed as he had gazed 1,000 times before at the pictures and patterns and incomprehensible signs on the golden sides of the Grail. If only, but the ancient lead-encased manuscript that they had found with the Grail in that deep-lost cave lay now at the bottom of the sea, flung by Barney himself from the end of Kamar Head in the last desperate effort to save the Grail and manuscript from the pursuing dark. Though the Grail had been saved, the manuscript came to the sea, and only in that manuscript was the secret by which the vital message written on the Grail could be understood. The dim light in the caravan could not dull the glow that came from the Grail. Yellow it blazed, like a fire before them, warm, glittering. Simon said softly, "It's all right, not a scratch on it." A cold voice from the shadows said, "It is in good hands." Abruptly, they were out of their absorption with the Grail, and back in the ominous half-light of the Painter of the Dark. The man's black bead eyes glittered at them from behind the table. He was a surreal pattern of black and white. Black eyes, white face, black hair, and there was a deeper strength and confidence in the voice now, a note of triumph. "I allow you a sight of the Grail," he said, "to make a bargain with you." "To make a bargain with us," Simon said, his voice coming out higher and louder than he intended. "All you do is steal things. Barney's drawing, Captain Tom's dog, and the Grail. It must have been you who stole it from the museum, or your friends." "I have no friends," said the man unexpectedly, swiftly. It seemed a bitter reaction that he could not help, and for a moment there was a faltering of his cold gaze as he knew it. In the next instant he was composed again, looking down at them both in total self-possession. "Stealing can be a means to an end, my young friend. My end is very simple, and there is no harm in it. All I require is 5 minutes of your time, of your small brother's time. That is, and of a certain talent that he has." "I'm not leaving him alone, not a minute," Simon said. "I did not suggest you should." "What then?" Barney said nothing, but watched cautiously. For once he felt no resentment that Simon should be taking over. Deep inside his mind something was beginning to fear this strange, taut, white-faced man more and more. Perhaps he had so clearly blazing a talent. It would have been much easier to face an uncomplicated monster. The painter looked at Barney. He said, "It is very simple, Barnabas Drew. I shall take the cup that you choose to call the Grail, and I shall pour into it some water and a little oil. Then I shall ask you to sit calmly and look into the cup and tell me what you see." Barney stared at him in amazement. Like a sea mist, a strange idea wreathed into his mind. Was the man not evil at all, but simply off his head, a little mad? That could, he suddenly realized, explain everything the strange painter had done. After all, even great artists sometimes did odd things, acted strangely. Think of Nutty Van Gogh. He said carefully, "Look into the water and the oil and tell you what I see. Oil does make nice patterns on water, and colors, well, that sounds harmless enough, doesn't it, Simon?" "I suppose so," Simon said. He was staring hard at the dark man, at the wild eyes and the pale, intent face. And the same hypnotic suggestion was creeping into his own mind. He, too, was thinking it more likely that their supposed adversary might not have anything to do with the dark at all, whatever Great Uncle Mary may have thought, but be simply an eccentric, a harmless nut, in which case it would be safest to humor him. "Yes," he said firmly. "Why not?" Simon thought, "When this daftness is all over, we can grab the Grail and run. Give him the slip somehow. Call Rufus in. Get the Grail back to Gummery." He looked hard at Barney, trying to communicate, nudged him surreptitiously, and flicked his eyes at the Grail. Barney nodded. He knew what his brother was trying to tell him. The same thought was only too vivid in his own mind. The dark man ran some water from the tap into a glass and poured it into the Grail. Then he took a small brown bottle from a shelf near the table and added a drop or two of some kind of oil. He looked greedily at Barney. The tension in him sang like a plucked wire. Barney sat in the chair before the table and slowly took the glowing golden chalice in both hands. Though the inscribed gold of the outside was as bright as it had ever been, the inside surface was a dull black. Barney stared down at the liquid in the bowl, in the cold green light from above his head, incomprehensible, shining out from the patterns of the painted ceiling. He watched the thin layer of oil on the surface of the water swirl